about lab analysis and quality control. And Zoran and I think we've known each other for a long time. We met, I think, through CIRA, the California Enological Research Association. He and I were both heads of different committees within that group. And then somehow I ended up president years ago. But I thought maybe, Zoran, you could start by just giving people a little bit of a background of who you are and why you know so much about lab analysis and QC.
I'm not sure that I know much about.
you know more than most.
You're never sure. So yes, my name is Zoran Ljepovic. Welcome to the presentation. I'm originally from Croatia, where I studied Enology, Viticulture, and Pomology, which is a fruit growing. And I worked there for one of the largest wineries, commercial cellar in a capital town. We covered like 56% production of the whole Croatian wine, which kind of feels now what we have with Gallo in California, I think. So from there, I went to United States 26 years ago, almost to a date, to do my master's at Fresno State. And that was a funny time when you put something, your name and resume online in 1996. And it felt like you put it somewhere in space and just travels. And then in 98, I got contacted by Gallo for a job to be a lab supervisor for their San Joaquin Valley concentrate, which is now called California Colors. It was an interesting project that I started there while I was doing my master's. After I finished master's, I ended up working for Constellation in Franciscan Winery as enologist and QC director. And one of the things that Julie mentioned, SERA Group, California Enology Research Association, this is something great. And in some sense, it might be similar what Julie is trying to do now with the Tri-Valley Conservancy. And I'm happy about it. Actually, I was the one also interviewing for that job because I really thought that was a great idea that you guys come up in the Valley, because it's a funny thing. It's so close to Napa, but many of us, including me, didn't know much about Livermore Valley. We always hated traveling through Livermore because you get stuck in the traffic. Now I spend like 11 months working there with Wenti from like August 2020 to June 2021. And I hiked around, rode the bike, and really enjoyed the area. It's a beautiful area, great grapes, great potentials. And also never forget that in 1885, the wine from from Livermore Valley won in Paris, actually, competition with one of the Bordeaux varietals. So you have a great potential, and that just still needs to be mined and polished. So that will be like the other thing is regarding SERA that I want to say is this is something like a benchmarking. You are competitor, at the same time you need to help each other to actually provide better experience for the customers, meaning you need to work more together in order to present themselves better to the world. And also it's going to help you when you learn from each other different things, basic things like wine and must analysis. These are not really tricks about whether one wine is going to be better than other, but it's going to help all of your teams to work towards successful results of the analysis. One of the major things I think, and you probably heard that so many times, if you cannot, if it's not measured, you cannot manage it. If you don't have a figure, how do you know what you're doing? There is a limited number of things that you can do on a whim without actually following for the success.
Zoran, we're losing your audio.
I don't know what, I'm sorry. I have no idea what is happening. I can see that my green line is going up and down. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So what was the last thing that you heard?
If you can't measure it, you
can't measure it, you can't manage it. Yeah.
Correct. The same thing is, if the data don't exist, it's like it never happened. So these are the two major things that you should follow. Also, in order to have a consistency from year in, year out, you as a winemaker might decide to change your recipes, kind of like in cooking. And I'm pretty sure Julie is a chef and also winemaker. She knows that really well. You have to write everything down what you are doing. If you don't, you're going to forget and you're not going to remember. So it's really important. Those are very important things. So having notes always. Talking about why do we need to do a juice and wine analysis? This is not for somebody on a whim to have some data. This is something that helps you go through. And I always call it, there is like a trilogy in a winemaking. One is that you have a good skills of being able to smell something good and smell something bad. Second, when you're doing analysis, this is trending. You want to see where those numbers are going. You never freak out when you see one number because you are always looking trending, especially during fermentation. The third one is also microbiology and being able to check it under microscope. That would be perfect. And I know many people are freaking out and moving away from microscope just because they haven't used it. And that's why that kind of a training should be still going on. We had a great person doing this. She's kind of retiring right now, which was Lisa Underwater. And there is not many other places they actually provide trainings. But that is something that would be really, really helpful. For my time being at 20, I introduced actually a microscope there. And there was a lot of stuff that we were able to find. We found every single vineyard that was bringing lactobacillus, which can actually stop your fermentation or actually even create a high volatile acidity. So it's really important to know that. So the rationale for analysis in production of wine, there is a pre-harvest, pre-fermentation, fermentation time, storage of wine prior to bottling, blending, pre-bottling, and post-bottling. So basic analytical tests used at various stages of production that tells you that you just pass certain stage and you can easily and safely move to the next stage. In preparation actually of this presentation, I was talking to Julie about measurements and how the measurements are reported. And unfortunately, for some reason, even this was published in 2002 by Gordon Burns and Art Caputi, which was a great scientist with Gallo, who worked for 50 years with Gallo. They published this in 2002, talking about how the analysis has been. These are just a couple of the major analyses in the large winery scale that they might be doing. And here they presented 1, 2, 3, A, B, or from A to G, the wineries with the types of reporting. Some analyses that are pretty much consistent, like a total and free SO2, they're all in milligrams per liter. Ethanol is also reported the same, percentage volume by volume. But the problem is many places reported at 60 Fahrenheit, while OIV, which is a European agency for wine, they reported at 20. And I know actually at the wine where I
20
work
Celsius, right?
20 Celsius or 68 Fahrenheit, yes.
Mhm.
It is critical because the difference between these two temperatures are about like 0.2, 0.3% by volume, which if you are at the borderline now, I mean, it's not anymore for tax purposes, but you still have to be correct if you're table wine under 14 or being other wines that are over 14, that difference will make a legal difference actually what you got. So that's the problem. And that's why it's so important that we know what the reporting is at. Reducing sugar, that's another one that many places are reporting in percentages or grams per 100 mils, while they should be reporting in grams per liter. As you can see, the last column proposed, that's the one that Gordon Burns and Art Caputi proposed in 2002. And we did talk actually through Vesta Group about this. And I know that some of the wineries where I worked, we did some changes, but obviously not everybody went into that direction. The other important analysis, titratable acidity. You know, the acronym is used TA. Some people call total acid, is not the same. So this is titratable acidity. Some people report again in percentages, grams per 100 mils, but it should be grams per liter. So if you decide to do, then your all acids will be reported in the same measurements, grams per liter, whether it's titratable acidity, whether it's acetic acid or volatile acidity or citric acid. Glucose, fructose, that's the same thing as reducing sugar, grams per 100 mils or grams per liter. That's another one that is reported differently. Same thing, malic, tartaric, lactic acid, if they're done by enzymatic analysis. And so on. I don't have to go through all these, but...
Zoran, just to remind people, Wente uses a different set of units as well. I believe, what was it, grams per deciliter for Wente on the reducing sugar?
No, it is also grams per liter, but they report with 3 digital places, which is kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Yes, but it is the kind of a percentage, grams per 100 mils. Yeah. And actually, I mean, I don't have opened that file with the reports, which you can open, and we can discuss that, because I would like to go through that too, to show actually this example. Yeah. So okay. I don't know if you want to do that.
Do you want to do that now?
I think it would make sense, actually.
Okay.
So you can unshare. I can stop sharing, and then you can share your screen.
Okay. Are you ready, Lori? Sorry, I'm looking for the right file.
No problem. Hi, Meredith. Great to see you there.
You too, Zoran. Good to see you.
I'm looking forward for another judging in Placerville.
Me too. Hopefully it happens.
We're having great time there.
Shoot, hold on one second. I've got to find the right file.
So what we have actually there, and you will see it, is that one of the laboratories was way off in some analysis, and good way of try to avoid this kind of a situation to be off is that you have a known knowledge of certain liquid, or you create your own standard, let's say for titratable acidity, that you know it's going to read you 0.5% or 5 grams per liter. So every day you should be running that sample and seeing actually the reading that shouldn't be much off from that 5 grams per liter. And I would say that if that laboratory was actually doing this, they would probably notice that their numbers are off, because they're off in every single analysis they did it versus other laboratories. That is kind of the way that can help you. Also, if you work like we work with Sarah Group, we would meet, let's say, all the people they work in lab, they would get together once a month or every other month and talk about different issues that people have in laboratory. And then we would also share our samples and do some comparisons of the analysis just to see, to find out where are the problems. So okay, go ahead, Julie.
Can you see it? Can you see it shared?
Yes.
Okay. So what we did was we took 3 different Cabernets from 2017, a Chardonnay and a Sauvignon Blanc. We met in the East Bay, Darren and I, and we decanted into the various sample tubes. And then he went to Wente and I drove up to Napa. So I took the exact same wine on January 10th from Vinci, ETS, my enologist, and Wente. All the analysis was done from the same bottle on the same day. So then you can see here, I think the easiest thing for you to see is the 3 Cabernets. You see that? Cab 1, 2, and 3.
Can you use your mouse?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want it larger or you can see it?
Let's do a little bit larger.
Okay. Is it making it larger for you? Hold on.
Nope.
Um,
Open up the whole screen for your
Okay.
program, that program that you're
yeah.
using.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
And now
here
zoom
we
in.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.
How's that?
Very good.
Okay. So maybe you can just talk about the analysis on the cab number 1. And you're seeing a range here on the first 2. You'll see Vinsai was done twice, the same bottle on June 1st and then again on January 10th. So you're comparing 2 different bottles there. And then the ones to the right of that are the same date of different labs.
Do we know, I have a
Mhm.
question for ETS. Do we
Okay.
know if ETS was using wine scan or they were actually using a specific analysis for each analyte?
I'm not sure.
That's always very important to tell them.
Yeah.
What's the purpose for it. So if ideally would be that they were using aeration oxidation rather than running the wine scan. Maybe that's why that number is so low.
Mm-hmm.
But overall looking, these numbers are not so far apart, except that ETS, it's outlier, everything else plus minus 2 or 3, you know, that's something that is doable. You know, we can accept that. When it comes to tight, yes.
So we have a question in the chat. What do we think
Yes.
is the precision for FSO2? What is the precision?
I didn't actually prepare any data for that, but I would say if you are within 2 or 3, that's where the limits are, and that would be acceptable. So, you know, if there is a difference of 1, winemaker shouldn't be requesting to add more SO2 to that bottling tank, let's say, or something like that. That's really not necessary.
Okay, so if you were looking at the VA line and you saw a variation from 0.87 from ETS and 0.98 from Vinsai, would you be concerned that the numbers were that different, or you feel like they're pretty similar?
I would say that this wine has a elevated VA. And I would be happy. I mean, I would be happy. I would be happiest actually if I see 0.87 to be the correct number. But I feel that, again, you would need to go back and ask them, did you guys do enzymatic acetic acid analysis or you did cash still volatile acidity?
Right.
So when the numbers are smaller, let's say under 0.8, the difference between analyzing cash still and acetic acid will be minor. But when you start going into the range of 1 gram or even over 1 gram, the differences might be by 0.2. So there is possibility that ETS did enzymatic or did wine scan, and it is possible that Viniscan maybe they did cash still. Do you know that?
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, so that would be a good answer, be good to know before we can actually make any conclusion here.
Right.
And that's what my assumption is. Venti does enzymatic, and this is the reason why their number is low, which means it analyzes only acetic acid. When we do cash still analysis for volatile acidity, in addition to acetic acid, we are analyzing some other acids, and that's why we have numbers higher. Also, if we are not off-gassing the CO2, the number can be even higher just because it's due to CO2. So I would say that probably 0.81 and 0.87 are the numbers to rely more than the higher numbers. But again, that all depends what type of analysis it is. Next one, like pH.
Yeah.
This is unacceptable that within 2 days, let's see, 10, 1, 1, 6. Oh, this is half year difference, huh?
Yeah.
Is this what it is? Oh, yes, it is. Okay. So We see that the Viniscan, same wine analyzed. This is not a bottled wine. This is a bulk wine, isn't it?
No, these are both finished bottled wines.
Finished bottled wine. So if this is correct, what they analyze and Vinisci or whatever this is called, the pH went up. If the wine is stable, the pH shouldn't be going up, especially in the bottle. If the pH went up, that means that it was somehow the acidity dropped. It could be that if that wine, for example, still have ml, didn't have ml. So I would say that these are off numbers due to the errors in analysis.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we see minologist ETS were right on the money and went to 2. So for some reason, there was something wrong with that pH. So they need to check the pH probe, clean up the pH probe, check the reading, the range. How do you call that? I forgot. When you have that range, you have to fall within certain numbers when you're running pH.
Right.
And
And it could be calibration of the pH meter itself.
And also calibration of pH meter, which the question is, how do you calibrate? I was always surprised that we calibrate between pH 4 and 7 because all our pHs are pretty much between 3 and 4. If your pH meter has maybe 3-step calibration, you can do 3, 4, and 7. Some people even suggest that you can do between 1 and 4.
Mhm.
These are the different buffers that you use. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
And you can find that out with the unit, and unit will provide you information how to do this calibration. I don't want to go into those details because that can be another proposition, people from the lab meeting and going specifically into detail for each one of the analysis. Do you have any other numbers that you want to point out here? Maybe glucose, actually.
Yeah, let's look at the glue-free.
So glue-free, so what is important here? We are monitoring glucose, fructose once when the Brix goes under 0, because then numbers are meaningless from the Brix numbers, which measures total soluble solids. Glucose, fructose is an enzymatic reaction, so it only reacts with the hexose sugars, which in the grapes are glucose and fructose. Glucose and fructose start 50-50, the amount in a grapes, and as they get fermented, yeast loves to munch more on glucose than fructose. So by the end of alcoholic fermentation, that ratio changes. And because a regular Saccharomyces yeast is glucophilic, it'll use up almost whole glucose. And if that momentum stops, you can have actually stock wine with some fructose, which you might actually have to help by using fructophilic yeast closer to the end of alcoholic fermentation if that doesn't go. But most of the time, it will eventually ferment. So we do enzymatic analysis just to see whether that is finished. So to me, any precision there is not so important, whether I read 0.3 or 0.5. Really, what I want to read this is gram per liter. Okay, so if this is gram per liter, actually, I'm sorry, then these numbers are very good. These numbers are very good because this is under 1 gram. So we normally call wine dry when it's under 1 gram, which means there is not much sugar left for Brettanomyces opportunistic yeast to actually take over and starts producing this nasty 4-ethylphenol and 4-ethyl guaiacol. So these wines are all dry, and all these numbers would be considered fine. As far as
I would say, I converted the Wente number so it's in the same units as the others. And if you were to see the report, I believe it would say 0.059 instead of 0.59. So that's where the conversation about looking at what your units are is really important if you're looking at a lab report from one lab versus another, and you're questioning whether you have the same numbers or not.
Yes.
And Julie and Zoran, should we just take a pause here and ask the attendees, does anybody have any questions at this point especially regarding this analysis we're doing on the 3 CADs from Livermore?
Doesn't look like it.
No questions?
Okay, so maybe we could go back to, unless you want to talk a little bit more about this comparing of lab analysis.
I do want to talk about the alcohol.
Okay,
If we all have an alkalizer unit and densitometer, our precision for alcohol should be within 0.01% volume by volume. So what we see here, we see some numbers kind of up and down more than expected. And I bet that this ETS number probably is reported at 60, not at 68, but I don't know what the other ones reported.
Yeah.
So if you can find this out and then normalize it and then reshare the table, that would be the best, I would say.
okay.
But yes, really, this is one of the most precise analyses. If your numbers are not like that, let's say probably not everybody has densitometer and alkalizer. Many of you might have only alkalizer, not densitometer. And if that's the case, you're probably buying a alcohol standard. And depending how you're handling that alcohol standard, these numbers will be different. Couple of different things. So you probably order like a 1 liter or 2 liter. And if you keep it in a single bottle, it can get oxidized. It can react with the CO2, can be dissolved in the bottle. Some people normally keep that bottle in the fridge. If you're keeping bottle in the fridge, it is very important that first thing in the morning, you take that out of the fridge and temper to the room temperature before you start doing analysis. That's critical, that's important. What we were doing actually at Franciscan, we were even going further. Once when we start opening 2 liter or 1 liter bottle and we have a headspace, we start carefully pouring it out into the 50 ml tubes, totally full to the top and closed and left in the fridge. And then every day we would just take one of those 50 mils as used as a standard. Now, you might be buying this from the outside laboratories, and we trust that outside laboratories are always correct. Not necessarily. I had situation where the guy was coming from Grgić Hills and asking me, hey, my alcohols and Sauvignon Blanc, they're all like over 14, and that makes no sense because the way we were doing additions and everything, it calls that we should be like 13 and a half or something like that. I said, you know what? Bring your samples to our lab and we're going to run on our alkalizer. And yes, all the numbers were lower, not as they were reading. The reason why they were reading higher, because their standard bottle of alcohol that they bought it from the known source, very respectable source, it was off. So you always want to make sure that all of that is correct. And that's why it is always nice to have laboratories that are close by, and you should know these people in the lab so you can actually come and check your numbers. And this is one of the reasons why I would suggest that you, with the help of Julie, on a regular basis, gather samples from each winery and analyze across many different labs and look for these differences and discrepancies so you can help each other to be more precise and accurate.
Maybe this is kind of related, is if I am analyzing a wine before bottling and I'm not analyzing the wine post bottling, then I personally took samples of finished wines, are you going to see a big difference between the winery that made the wine and me taking a finished bottle somewhere? How would you talk about if you don't take samples after your bottling to have as a record, how would you compare to somebody like me taking a bottle and getting it analyzed?
Well, I would analyze and see if the numbers jive with the numbers that they're pre-bottling with the previous winery. What I would probably do, I would use a single wine standard, like people buy Franzia box and analyze.
Mm-hmm.
And you analyze at both labs and you want to see if your numbers are falling very close. If they're not, then you need to figure out which analysis is off and try to adjust that. That's why, you know, everybody has I think the Franzia boxes are more bought for the analytics than actually for drinking. Everybody has a Franzia box actually in the lab, but that really helps you. I think you strike a really good point. I got surprised how many wineries, even large wineries, they don't analyze bottled wine, which is very wrong. You have to have in mind that when the seal is put, which means cork or screw cap, into the bottle, those wines become individual from that point. And they can be so much individual that if there is a variability from filler spout to filler spout, that you already have issues and created a difference during bottling. And without actually testing it, you wouldn't have a clue whether problem is or problem exists or problem doesn't exist.
Okay, so are we ready to stop sharing and then we can go back to your slides?
There was didn't we talk, okay, it's fine. That's okay. I think we covered most of the stuff there. I just need to find out my, hold on.
Yeah.
Where's my share now? Share screen. There you go.
Right now, oh, there we go. Yep.
You see it. Quality. Yes. Quality is something that every winemaker is about, and I'm pretty sure the owner also of the place. But in our minds, quality is something completely different. Quite often, quality is very subjective judgment and which I think needs to be standardized based on what are our expectations and what we want to deliver to the customer. We want to deliver to the customer provenance of wine, something that as we made it, we know how it tastes here. This is how we want this wine to taste on the table of the customer. But it's a long way there. And you know, they might get surprises and that you don't know actually that you send them surprises based on many different factors. So one of the things that we cover with quality is like the non-inferiority or superiority of something. And it could be described for the grapes in 9 categories, starting from color. We are very visual animals, and color is one of them. You would be surprised if the color is weaker, the wine quite often gets scored lower. And in order to prove that to yourself, take Pinot Noir, because it's very known for that. It might actually be poorly colored, but the taste can be great. Now, when we did as a Sera group for a sensory group, we actually tasted 5 Pinot Noirs in a clear glass. And the darkest Pinot Noir won, and the lightest Pinot Noir, I think, came second to the last. Then we use the same wine at the same sitting and pour in the dark glasses, black glasses. So you don't see the color, you can only smell and taste. And the lightest colored Pinot Noir came first. So that clearly shows how much we are driven by color. So color is very important. Now, also with color, which actually in the red wines represents anthocyanins and tannins and their complexation, it brings a lot of stuff and flavor. So that's also there too. Aroma intensity is something that is very important. This is the reason why we love to walk through the vineyards and munch on the grapes and look for that ripening flavors. So it's not that we are getting crazy that we want to have a high Brix. Unfortunately, I would say that vertical shoot positioning drives that in this hot climate, that we get a fast Brix development, but maybe not other aromatics and tannins. And that's somehow we need to work in the vineyards to figure that out, how we can have an equal ripening of the sugars, tannins, anthocyanins. Complexity, that's a big one. Subtlety, palate strength, length of the wine. So what's the length of the wine? So for example, Tubac Chuck versus, let's say, Opus. Both of these wines have their own quality, and that quality has to be constant. I'm talking about like production quality. So 2-buck chuck cannot surprise you that it tastes completely different, which means year in, year out, from year to year, you have to produce the same level of quality. It doesn't deliver much. I mean, that doesn't bring intensity or complexity, but brings the smell that is decent, pleasant, brings the taste that comes and goes pretty quickly, which means there is no length, doesn't linger after you actually spit the wine or swallow the wine. While more complex and higher quality of wines, they have that length, and that's what we go for. Definitely balance is very important. And I would say recently the balance, we are out of balance because we have such a high alcohol wines, which quite often subdue aromatics and they're not expressing their best. Example, Placerville, when we do tasting of Zinfandel from that area, the alcohol level of Zinfandels there is like 15 through 17, 18% of alcohol. They're so unbalanced. And those wines quite often get poor scores due to that reason. Longevity is something, how long the wine will live. The way we make wines now, they're mostly made, when you look at the total volume of wine produced and purchased, is short term actually. And especially because we keep it longer on the wine, so longevity actually kind of is not that as good as maybe used to be like 30, 40 years ago when we produced 12.5% of alcohol, very astringent, wild, I said untamed wine that needed sometimes to age 2 to 5 years to actually become approachable. We do now much more approachable wines, and longevity is something that we can again talk some other time. I don't want to go more into it. Also, the quality is defined as being suitable for its intended purpose. I already mentioned this, while satisfying customer expectations. Like, what's the beauty of Opus? You can always use excuse that one vintage was different because it was raining, it was this, it was that. For 2-buck chuck, it doesn't matter whether it was raining or not, that wine has to taste every year the same because that's what is expected. With Opus, you can see much more variability from vintage to vintage. Also, one of the things actually, when I was working at Venti, we tried to kind of express how we want to say what the cost of poor quality is, how we're going to monitor what's going on. And we say it like this. Let's say that we get the best from the vineyard. So we call it 100 points there. How can we maintain those 100 points or be close to that throughout the process of winemaking? Quite often there is a higher chance to ruin wine during the process of winemaking that actually improved. The best improvement of the wines is when we really have bad vintages with rain and with winemaking skills and styles and the things that we are doing actually in cellar, we can improve that poor score of the grapes that comes from the vineyard. That I see actually more at that time. But somehow you can set up your goals and try to evaluate this as a group, finding your own ways of measuring what the quality is and actually trying to keep up the quality of that wine close what your grapes were. And definitely winemakers put their mark on quality by balancing, with the balancing act, actually making something that is pleasant and nothing that's kind of sticking out, we try to say. I like to use the term tamed, especially when it comes to tannins. Initially, tannins quite often can be harsh and can be simple. And even during the process of winemaking, we help integration and polymerization of tannins when they become softer and more approachable, which means they come more from the being a dry, austere, like we say, gravel or sandpaper, going more towards like velvety. So it's very much touchy-feely kind of a thing. You know, velvety is something that is always very, very much desirable in the wine. This is one of the things that Zoran is one of the famous quality guy who wasn't that much accepted during the war and post-war, Second World War, in quality. So him, Deming, and also Lee Iacocca, like in business, they all went to Japan and they got very successful in Japan. And you probably know the story that by 80s, Japan started buying actually American companies. They got so successful, their quality got so much improved, thanks to actually American quality people. But what they had in mind is there is always kind of that trilogy of inequality. Here it says quality planning. What that is actually, it's quality assurance, quality control, and quality improvement. These three pillars actually are part of the quality management system. This is something that most of the serious companies, whether they're wineries or others, try to actually introduce in their systems. Maturity gauges. I did mention a little bit general fruit conditions, taste assessment of grape flavor, and tannin maturity in reds. So when you are in the vineyard and you are biting on the total grapes, you might be doing actually biting on the skins. If the skin still becomes astringent, that means it's still not ripe. It has to taste less astringent, pleasant. And then once when the skins become tasting pleasant, then you go towards the seeds. You are looking the color of the seeds. If they're green, you don't want to even taste them. They need to kind of turn brown, which means they are getting lignified. With the process of lignification, the tannins, they are bitter and astringent. They are becoming more like a nutty. So once you start tasting nutty character from the seeds, you know the seeds are getting close to ripeness. There is also assessment of varietal aroma and aroma intensity. You want to really taste some great stuff coming from the grapes, and sometimes that is just not there. I remember when I was doing consulting with the Folkart family vineyards in Susun Valley, I was tasting Sangiovese and there was just flavor not coming. And it was driving actually the owner nuts because I was like keeping the grapes. Brix was going up. Eventually, when we reach like 25.5, the flavor starts really coming up, and we pick that Sangiovese, and it was delicious. It was great. At the same time, I also had to work with Dolcetto, and Dolcetto wasn't come up with a flavor. But the problem with Dolcetto was it starts actually dropping the berries. If you touch the cluster, the berries were falling off, and I got scared and I said, okay, it's time for picking that wine at that point. So in the lab, what you do with the grapes, you measure soluble solids. That actually gives you the Brix reading. Titratable acidity, you want to make sure that the acid is not too high. It's coming towards somewhere that you expect, which again, different regions, that's different, but somewhere overall, people are somewhere in between like 6 and 7 grams per liter of titratable acidity. You are also looking into tartaric malic ratio. Higher malic acid means the grapes are less ripe. So you are watching to see that malic is not gonna be very high. And then also
Zoran,
pH, yes.
So you're recommending that when people are doing their sampling of the fruit and tasting of the berries, that they should be running lab analysis along the way and running a malate, Brix, and maybe a pH, just as a way to kind of see the trend of
Totally. And I wouldn't start that before we are like halfway through veraison. So let's say when you start having veraison, and where it's like most of the berries on the cluster are kind of switching color. I don't know exactly if somebody is from vineyard there, tell me when you start calling like a day one for veraison. How much of the berries needs to turn the color before you call it day one? What do you think, Julie?
Well, I don't think it's the first berry, but I do think it's you start to see enough where you're paying attention to it. It's not like one here, one there. It's higher than that.
It's kind of everywhere visible that the colors start turning. So that would be your day one. And normally from veraison in the normal years, it's supposed to take like 40 days. So if that's the case, and if day one is like July, I don't know, let's say August 1st, 20 days later, so August 20th, August 21st, I'm going to start to bring my first berry samples, grapes cluster samples to the winery, and I can start doing my analysis with sugars, TA, and the pH.
Yeah, because I know for a lot of people, they only do Brix and they never measure any of their acids. So they're not sure. And I think that's very helpful. So you can see that the malate's dropping and the pH is going up. If you're only measuring Brix, there's a lot of information you're not getting.
Exactly, and a Brix is only one parameter that is important, but there is so much more, like we were talking about tasting and also getting this TA and pH. And probably we would benefit from that in the vintage 2020 when I was at 20, because we got two weeks of no photosynthesis when I felt I live on Mars, because the sun was like purple and the sky was like orange, and there was no photosynthesis for 2 weeks and dehydration was going on. And when we got grapes, the winemakers got scared to use too much acid because they were thinking they're going to have this balanced wine, but the pHs post fermentation in the reds were like from 3.9 to 4.5, and
Wow.
in the whites were like 3.7 to 4.2, which is quite by almost 0.5 difference or more. So we eventually got really high pH wines, which caused us to have microbial issues, and we had to use the ion exchange to drop because we couldn't do it with acid because acid would be too high. So we did ion exchange to drop the pH to normal level, like 3.7, 3.75. And the wine turned to be delicious. It actually finally started tasting normal. At such a high pH, it didn't taste good at all. All right. So let's move to the next slide. How much time we have? We are about 12 minutes to 5. So the lab analysis pre-harvest, we already mentioned some: Brix, soluble solids, pH and titratable acidity. We might be looking into acid profile, berries aromas, and some people might be doing sugar per berry. Some people might be actually even doing the weight of berries. So berry expectation, for example, weight. If for let's say Cabernet, some people might expect that they want to have by average 1 gram per berry. If they read 1.2 grams, they might decide to actually remove some juice and do something that's called saignée. I personally didn't find out that we benefited too much from saignéing, so I don't know what your experience, Julie, is.
It really depends on the tank, but some of them do really well with it. And because you're just changing that ratio of skin to juice. But for some, I agree, it doesn't help. But if you have really high Brix and you want to add water to a fermentation, sometimes I'll take juice out as a saignée in order to add water back and keep my ratio the same. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
That's a very important part, yes, because otherwise you are diluting it again, just
Right.
for the sugar and alcohol purposes. Yes. Pre-fermentation, again, Brix, pH, titratable acidity. Now nutrients, nitrogen and ammonia. This is important, and many different companies that are selling you nutrients, they will also give you the scale of at what Brix, how much nutrients to expect in order to have a safe fermentation. That is kind of important to look at. You also have to look at that you don't maximize, because there are maximum levels how much you can actually add nutrients to the juice or must.
So that what he's referring to is yeast assimilable nitrogen, or YAN. That's what he's talking about.
Yes. Yes. During fermentation, we continue monitoring Brix, volatile acidity, malolactic fermentation, ethanol. What this means is, if your Brix is nicely moving down, temperature is going up, everything smells good, you probably don't need to do volatile acidity. But if you start seeing some sticking, or maybe you start seeing some other activity of bacteria, That's maybe your time to do what we call baseline analysis, meaning something that is important that will tell you whether there is something else active beside actually yeast fermenting sugar. That's why we want to do volatile acidity. If you are getting damaged grapes due to who knows what reason from the vineyard, you might actually want to even analyze volatile acidity as soon as you crush grapes. If the grapes are
That's
sound,
what I do, yeah. Mhm.
yeah, if the grapes are sound, that's not necessary. For malolactic fermentation, you're going to run your malic or lactic acid to see if there is activity there. And if that's the case, depending on what stage of fermentation, you will figure out what makes more sense. I was in situations sometimes that I see that malolactic is raging like crazy. The VA is not going too much up, and I might actually decide for malolactic completely finish, and then actually having yeast finishing its fermentation. But in many other instances, probably you want to somehow fix malolactic and continue alcoholic fermentation. Definitely you want to see whether it's higher volatile acidity production. Who knows? Maybe your malolactic actually is done by the lactobacillus, and that one will definitely cause your fermentation stalling. So it is important at that point to fix that. And how would you fix it? Many different ways. The minimal invasion would be by actually maybe adding 20 parts of SO2 and using a yeast hulse, 1 to 2 pounds. If that doesn't work and you see that the number might be, if you're able to check under microscope that the number of lactobacillus is not stalling but actually going up, you might actually have to go into your toolbox and reach out to lysozyme. Lysozyme is a egg whites enzyme that we actually have in our saliva and help us to survive when we put all kinds of garbage in our mouth. So we don't actually support some wild bacteria. Lysozyme will kill lactobacillus, will disrupt lactobacillus. So this is something that there was a year in which one I ended up using over 100 kilograms of lysozyme because we had so much lactobacillus spreading through our winery. And yes, ethanol, there is something that many of us are doing, midterm potential ethanol analysis. The reason for this is if we notice that actually our final alcohol is going to be higher than we expected based on the initial analysis, soaking of the must, and also water addition, we might consider another water addition during alcoholic fermentation to make sure that we don't get high alcohol. So that's kind of important to do. Next one, post-fermentation. Again, residual sugar. So now it's not Brix anymore. We are analyzing enzymatically glucose, fructose. If we are done already with alcoholic fermentation and maybe not going through malolactic, we're gonna add sulfur dioxide to help wine settle and be ready for aging. Heat stability, cold stability, that's something that happens later on when we already created blends and we are getting ready for bottling preparation. And the last slide is preparation for bottling QC. So we have a final blend. One of the important things in a larger scale wineries is pesticides. So if you don't have, or you can't afford yourself to analyze for pesticides, but you are actually buying grapes, you're not growing your own grapes, or actually if you're growing on your own grapes, before you receive grapes before fermentation, you want to know all the paperwork. You want to know everything that has been done in a vineyard and see if there is any potential that might be still some residues that you will be getting into your fermenters. One of the biggest issue could be if you use too much sulfur in the vineyards, because that can cause a huge hydrogen sulfide production, stinky wine that you will not be able to really eliminate from the wine. TCA analysis, this is something relatively new within last 20 years. There was a lot of environmental halogenic anisole issues, and we start analyzing wine for TCA even before we bottle. But that's again another pricey analysis, but I just put it here as a suggestion. Stability and clarification, already mentioned some of that. Microbial status. Well, if you're one of these believers that you want to do minimal filtration, if you decide to do that, you really need to know what your microbial status is before you bottle your wine, and find different ways to remove those microbes. If you don't want to do filtration, maybe you can use centrifugation or something, settling and something like that. Otherwise, you will be using filtration. I would say filtration, especially in the large scale production, makes more sense because it's much safer. You're taking more risk without doing filtration. But at the same time, the most skillful people, yes.
I just wanted to suggest that if you're doing custom crush, it's also important, not only in big production facilities, but if you are one of, I don't know, 25, 50 clients, it's probably a good idea to think about your microbial status, being in a facility where you're not in control of everything.
Totally, and this is the matter of how the custom crush is set up. Some custom crush places, they actually take care of everything, and then they have a much better control over it. But if you are custom crush like bean to bottle, when you might have 100 winemakers, they actually provided something for them. They have their own room where they have computers, and they're paying attention to what is going on. But you are right, you don't know who does what and what kind of sanitation is done. And at that point, microbiological status is very important. Monitoring, checking the wines, and filtration definitely would be the safest, yes. And as I said, if the filtration is done properly, which means if you have a small scale filtration system, or actually large scale filtration system, you want to make sure that it's initially purged with water and citric and SO2, and then your wine is first circulated with a tank before you actually start letting go into the final, let's say, bottling tank. You want to know that wine tastes free of any kind of a pad material if you're doing like pad filtration or something. Nowadays, a lot of places are using crossflow. Crossflows are pretty good actually, because they're not going to give you any flavors, and will recover a lot of your wine. But they might need some time to recover wine itself just from the process.
So Zoran, we have a question in the chat. I think we're talking about filtration. To what micron does it have to be sterile filtration?
I like that. Well, let me tell you, if you worry about bacteria, you would have to go through 0.45 micron. Absolute. If you worry about yeast only, not bacteria, you would go to minimum size 0.65 microns. Now, looking those two 0.45, 0.65, the difference is not much, and all major or most of the great compounds that are in the wine, they will be passing through these filters. They're not going to be retained on the filters. We are not going to be losing them. It's just a matter of giving a bottle shock to wine to recover from any processing, to come back with a recovered flavor. And you probably notice when you taste wine immediately post-bottling versus actually after a couple of months, that the wine tastes much better later. So yes, sterile filtration, I don't even dare to call it anymore sterile, because I see so much problems with that final filtration. I call it final filtration. But yes, it is the one that removes the microbes for sure. The major thing is that your final filters are only safe, like a safety door keepers, you know, because you're supposed to already remove major population of microbes that might be potentially in the wine before bottling tank. And nowadays people are doing this with the cross flows, or if you don't want to use that, you might be using centrifuge or hoping to settle the wine. So there are different options.
And Zoran, we have a comment from David Everett. He's just saying that Lodi Wine Labs will do pre-bottling filtration panel and give you guidance as to what is your best approach to filtering your wine.
That is very good. And that is what, like when I worked out of Robert Mondavi, if they would do unfiltered wine, which was probably mostly on the wines that are bottled under 1,000 cases, they had a full profile, microbial profile before they would make decision like that. That is great, but if that is the case, you need to react immediately. That tank cannot stay idle for a long time. As soon as you get these results, you need to go and proceed with bottling. Don't wait. Another thing that during the bottling tank analysis, the CO2 might be important. CO2 under the threshold levels is on the regular still white wines and the red wines. But if you are making a Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Muscat, they're all over the threshold. So which means they're going to be rather not under 700 milligrams per liter. They will go over gram per liter, maybe 1.2 to 2 grams per liter even. So that's why it would be important actually to analyze CO2, whether you have a carbodoser or you are buying more sophisticated equipment. Dissolved oxygen is the key. You want to make sure that during the process of blending and everything post maturation, that you monitor DO and you don't introduce too much DO to your wine. When we were talking about longevity, it is related to the wine being saturated with oxygen. According to Vernon Singleton, the red wines can go through like 20, 30 saturations, while the white wines maybe 8 to 10 saturations. This is more like a technical than being actually literal, because in real life, that really depends. How much life grapes might have lost during the poor grape season, harvest season. And then also from then on, it's that already life is ticking for that wine that you are trying to make. So by actually being careful how you handle oxygen, post-alcoholic fermentation and pressing, you might save more lives for post-bottling. Normally, one saturation is 8.4 milligrams per liter of oxygen. So you can then calculate what that would be. This is the reason why I suggest when you finish bottling and you open up one bottling for tasting, instead of immediately putting it out, dumping it or something like that, keep it in your lab and keep on tasting every day for like 2 weeks or so, and see how quickly that wine actually will fall apart. And that will give you an idea, you know, what the shelf life of that wine will be. Bottled wine analysis is critical. I mentioned that at the beginning, and it is really important because that's going to be your starting point for anything else that might have been happening on the market, and also that you don't have surprises. And it will tell you, you know, how well your bottling line works, which means besides just regular wet chemistry analysis, also I'm thinking about measuring dissolved oxygen, and in ideal situation, total package oxygen, which if you don't have a sophisticated equipment, you can use the same diometer. You would just have to shake that bottle for 3 minutes to mix the headspace oxygen with the dissolved oxygen. So you dissolve everything to the wine, do another reading. And these numbers, DO normally should be in the wine under 1, in best case scenario, especially with the newer equipment, 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams per liter. But definitely under 1. I wouldn't start bottling if I cannot get the DO in a bottle under 1. With the total package oxygen, in ideal situation, that reading would be between 1.5 to 2 grams per liter, milligrams per liter. But definitely that would be the goal. And if that's not the case, that this kind of analysis will help you to do better preventative maintenance with equipment, with the bottling line, filler spouts, gaskets, to see where's the problem coming, because you're going to have a variability. If one gasket fails out of your 6 or 12 fillers, you're going to have every 6 or 12 bottles being bad, and that's not good. So that's what I got here covered, but if you guys have any questions, let me know. Or Julie, if you want to add something.
Well, after we had our conversation earlier this week, we decided that we needed a second session. So as far as the actual pieces of equipment on a bottling line and the quality control that you would do for each piece of equipment, we're going to do that as a separate talk. But I do think the most important thing here is the dissolved oxygen and making sure that you know what your DO is in your tank, but you also are checking, take a sample pretty early on in the bottling run, and then do regular intervals during bottling where you're checking the dissolved oxygen and making sure that all your equipment is working properly, because nothing worse than finding out after the fact when you could have fixed it while you were in the middle of bottling. I think that's really important.
Yes, one important thing is that I would suggest all of you that if you don't have a optical diometer, that you should think about buying the optical diometer. If you still have a polarographic meter, it takes so much time in maintenance and replacing the membranes and working with that, and it can be quite off. So that's one of the issues. The other issue could be if you need to have the same type of meter that you are using in your tank and the one that you can actually insert in the bottle. And in order to be able to insert in a bottle, it has to be long enough, narrow, that you can actually go in a major part of the bottle when you're measuring, so you don't pick the oxygen from the top. Which tank and bottle, I said that I would never start bottling until I reach under 1 DO in bottle. But in order to do that, my bottling tank should be targeted, let's say 0.5 or even lower milligrams per liter before you start. Once when you successfully run the line continuously, your delta DO between bottling tank and a bottle will be dropping, and in a really good scenarios, it can be only 0.1, but we normally had the standard that we would accept by 0.3 difference. And you will also have a U-shaped curve when you analyze DO, which we can present that next time, is that at the startup, your DO will be higher. At the end, your DO will be higher. It's just a matter how do you handle emptying the tank. As you are emptying the bottling tank, you should have a constantly pressurized tank with nitrogen or some other inert gas. So instead of actually mixing the surface of wine with air, you should be mixing a surface of wine with inert gas. And as you go down, so you don't have a pickup, because at the end of the day, you are opening up actually the door to see where your volume of wine is when it's under the door. You are now bringing huge amount of air. And if you're not having inert gas, that's going to definitely show you.
So I just wanted to give people an opportunity if anyone wants to ask a question today. We'll take another couple of minutes to answer questions.
I have a sort of a question, but also a comment too. But yeah, first of all, thanks you guys for all this information. It's really helpful. And I'm hoping that there's maybe like a follow-up meeting to this, because one of the problems I seem to run into a lot is that once people have this information, once they do the testing and get the results, if the results aren't good, they then get afraid because they don't know how to fix that. So maybe like some sort of a meeting where we focus more on how to solve problems would be good.
Okay.
Meredith, that's called consulting.
You would think. You
would think you won't get everything for free, really.
Right.
No, I'm happy to, I think the next one will be specifically QC on the bottling line and going equipment by equipment. And then either that time or we'll do a follow-up where people can bring up issues and we can try and come up with solutions. In the meantime, if people have questions, I'm always available to talk about things on the side, but I like the idea of having meetings where we can all discuss it together. I think that's great. Anybody else have any questions for Zoran or myself? Okay, thank you, Zoran, for coming and being a part of our meeting today. I really appreciate it. This was our first ever Zoom meeting, so thank you for being our first guest. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. I really appreciate it. As I said, I'm always available, so if you have questions related to what we talked about today, I can also give you Zoran's contact information if you want to talk to him directly. So just thank you, everybody, for showing up, and definitely send us questions and topics for other meetings. There will be many more after this one. So thank you, everybody, and have a good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you.